Greatness is never given. It is forged. Forged in the blood of empires and the dust of history.
Babylon, 323 BCE. The most powerful man on earth lies in a palace, gripped by a fever he cannot shake. At 32 years old, Alexander of Macedon commands a territory stretching from the sun-baked deserts of Egypt to the frozen peaks of India. And in a matter of days, he is dead. He leaves behind a sprawling empire, but no heir old enough to take the throne, and no clear map for the future. When his desperate generals ask who should inherit his crown, his final, whispered answer is a lit match. To the strongest. The men who fought beside him, known as the Diadochi, or successors, immediately tore it to pieces. Instead of a unified realm, they carved the map into rival kingdoms, launching decades of relentless assassinations and civil wars. The political structure he built evaporated almost overnight. He established no lasting dynasty. His final years were defined by intense paranoia, the execution of close friends, and an exhausted army that outright refused to march any further. If we grade his success by the survival of his political borders, he was a failure. To understand why history remembers him as the Great, we have to look past the physical map and measure the cultural shockwave he sent across the ancient world. The conquest of that world did not start from scratch. When Alexander took the throne at age 20, he inherited a disciplined military machine designed by his father, King Philip II. The backbone of this machine was the Macedonian phalanx. Infantrymen stood 16 ranks deep, locking their shields together and extending 18-foot spears called sarissas to create an impenetrable, bristling wall of wood and iron. While the phalanx pinned the enemy in place, Alexander utilized the companion cavalry. This was an elite, hand-picked force of horsemen trained to move with terrifying speed, acting as a surgical strike weapon to slice through exposed flanks. This exact combination dismantled the Persian superpower at the Battle of Gaugamela. Facing an army of perhaps 200,000, Alexander extended his right flank outward. The Persians mirrored the movement to block him, inadvertently stretching their own line and tearing a gap right in their center. He recognized the mistake instantly. Alexander struck, leading his cavalry in a tight wedge formation straight through the breach, driving directly at the Persian king and shattering the enemy's formation from the inside out. Spears can take a city, but holding millions of people across 3 continents is a different challenge. Alexander saw that fear alone wouldn't prevent the next rebellion or keep the empire's vast administration from crumbling. He shifted his approach from pure destruction to absorption. He started adopting the customs, the dress, and the administrative structures of the people he had just defeated, styling himself as a localized ruler rather than a foreign invader. This strategy became obvious when he arrived in Egypt. Rather than burning their temples, he presented himself respectfully to their priests and allowed them to crown him pharaoh. He then made a grueling trek deep into the western sands to visit the Siwa Oasis, an isolated shrine holding an ancient oracle. He needed divine validation to cement his authority over his new subjects. When he emerged from that sanctuary, his self-image had shifted. The oracle confirmed him as the son of Zeus Amen. He began to project this divine status, going so far as to mint coins showing himself with the ram horns of a living god. This god complex alienated the hardened Macedonians who had bled for him. He demanded they perform proskynesis, bowing face down before him, a Persian custom they found humiliating. The friction boiled over into paranoid purges, the murder of a close friend in a drunken rage, and finally, a massive troop mutiny at the Bias River. His ambition to become the divine ruler of a unified world broke the very army that put him on the throne. He stood victorious on the edge of the known map, yet entirely isolated from the men who got him there. Which brings us back to his deathbed in Babylon. When he stopped breathing, his political empire died with him, leaving behind nothing but ruins and rivalries where a unified government was supposed to stand. The actual consequence of his campaign was cultural. It was the birth of Hellenism. His generals could carve up the land, but they could not divide the shared ideas he had already seeded. Across the Middle East and Asia, Greek architecture, philosophy, and classical art fused permanently with ancient Eastern traditions. The ideals of Athenian geometry and Stoicism were suddenly being discussed in the temples of Persia and the outposts of India. He left physical proof of this fusion by establishing over 20 new cities named Alexandria. These grew into thriving centers of learning and trade that bridged previously isolated civilizations. Greek became the common tongue for trade and science across 3 continents. Long after his political borders vanished, the language brought by his soldiers remained the standard for those who wanted to write, govern, or explore. Alexander was a flawed, paranoid tyrant who failed completely at long-term political empire building. Yet history calls him the Great because the violence of his campaign forced the East and West together, creating a shared world of trade and thought that outlived every border he drew.